David said, "The Lord, who has saved me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, will save me from the hand of this Philistine." So Saul said to David, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, "I cannot walk with these, for I am not used to them." So David removed them. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in his shepherd's bag in the pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he drew near the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near to David, with his shield-bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field." But David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied."
Picture the scene in your mind. On the southern mountain ridge are the Philistines, and on the northern mountain ridge are the Israelites, 2 armies. And in the middle, in the valley of Elah, is Goliath. Goliath is a fierce, experienced warrior who is challenging the Israelites to send one of their soldiers down to fight him. It'll be a one-on-one battle. Winner takes all. But the problem is that there is not a single Israelite warrior willing to come down and fight Goliath. And honestly, I don't blame them. Goliath was the fiercest warrior, and he had battled many times, and he was a giant. Now, not a jolly green giant or Jack and the Beanstalk kind of giant, just a really, really tall person. Think size of a professional basketball player. That's how big he was. And he looked massive, and they were terrified. And then, out of the blue, everyone is surprised when a shepherd boy from Bethlehem volunteers to fight the giant. How? How can David have courage to go and fight Goliath when no one else will? I think it is because David knew who he was, and whose he was. David was very clear about who he was. When Saul tried to put all of Saul's armor and expectations on David, what did he do? He said no, and he took it all off. And he picked up his shepherd's staff and 5 smooth stones, and he went out to face the giant. Now, if this were a movie, this is the place where I, at least, would have my hands in front of my eyes going, no. There's no way you can win. And, the story of David and Goliath has been for generations the template of the underdog story, right? But the ironic thing, something that Malcolm Gladwell points out in his book, David and Goliath, is that by choosing to be himself and to battle the giant out of who he is, David actually has an advantage, a huge advantage. Because you see, while the giant is standing there covered in his armor with his javelin and sword, waiting for David to get close enough so he can strike, David stands at a safe distance, puts a stone in the sling, swings it over his head, and sends a stone traveling the speed of a bullet and takes the giant down. If David had tried to do it some other way, he probably would have lost. But using his skills, knowing who he was, helped him to be victorious. And God has given each of us unique skills and talents and abilities, spiritual gifts, resources. And if we want to face the giants in our lives, we can do that most effectively when we remember who we are. It was certainly true for Phyllis Zeno. Phyllis's giant was not giant, but little. It was a child that had come into her day nursery for care. This child's behavior went from loud and violent on the one hand to the next minute she would be curled up whimpering on the floor. And Phyllis was filled with compassion and wanted to help her, but Phyllis didn't have any special training in psychology or childhood trauma. But Phyllis offered who she was and what she had. And so first she prayed for the child every day, often. And she began to reach out in non-threatening ways. And Phyllis says that some days it was 1 step forward and 4 steps backward. But finally the day arrived that she was able to scoop the child up, put her in her lap, and rock her in a rocking chair. And as she rocked, she sang, "Jesus loves me, this I know." And day after day after day, that became their ritual, rocking and singing. Until one day, the child said the very first words that Phyllis had ever heard her speak. She asked, "Will you sing me the song about the man who loves me?" What if Phyllis had said, "No, that giant's too big. I'm not trained for that." But she didn't. Phyllis knew who she was and what she had to offer. And it was exactly what the child needed. And because she had courage to face her giant, a child's life was changed forever. If we're going to have courage, we have to know who we are, but we also have to know whose we are. The Bible is very clear that David did not defeat the giant just in his own strength. And you'll remember when David approaches the giant, what does he say? "You come at me with spear and sword and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the" what? "Lord." David trusted in the power of God, and he found courage in the knowledge that God would go with him. And God does, and it is through the power of God that David is victorious. I wonder how many times we face our giants without courage because we're just trying to do it alone. We like, at least I do, I'm guessing you might also, we'd like to be in control of situations and outcomes. And so we're trying so much to control everything that we just kind of push God to the side. And then we wonder why we're anxious and exhausted. It reminds me of the story of a boy who was going to build a fort. And he had cleared the area for the fort, all except for one giant boulder that just wouldn't budge. And his dad came out to check on him, and his dad said to him, "Have you tried everything?" And the boy said, "Yes, everything. I've pushed, I've pulled, I've tried putting a stick under and using leverage, and it won't move." And his dad smiled, and he said, "There's one more thing you could try." And the boy said, "What?" "You could ask your father for help." We have to remember not only who we are, but whose we are. Friends, we are all faced with giants. For some of us, the giants are just the stresses and strains of work and school and parenting. For the others, the giants are financial strains or struggles in family relationships, worry over a loved one, adjusting to the changes that happen when we've lost a loved one. And honestly, I think it takes courage just to get up every morning. Especially now when we know as soon as we pick up our phone or we turn on the news, We're going to be bombarded with all the giant problems in our world, right? War and famine and hunger and injustice and racism and poverty and political parties fighting and churches divided. And sometimes it just feels like it's overwhelming and too much. And we could start to feel powerless. But at its very heart, this story about David and Goliath is a story of hope. Hope in knowing that God sees possibilities that we have not yet even imagined. And that God invites us to be a part of what God is doing in the world. And that when we remember who we are and whose we are, God uses us, our skills and talents and abilities and resources to bring God's kingdom to bear on all of the hurts and needs of the world. Will it be easy? No. Will we always get things working out the way we want them to? Of course not. Will we be frightened? Absolutely. I remember the words of Nelson Mandela. He said, "I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." We can triumph over our fear when we remember who we are and whose we are. This week, Simone Biles made history. Did you see it? If you haven't watched it yet, go home and Google. It was amazing. She became the first female gymnast to do two very difficult skills in competition. And she's now the most decorated female gymnast in history. But she didn't reach her success without facing some giants, multiple giants in her life. And one of them that she talks about was overcoming her struggles with her body image. She said when she was a child, she didn't look like other little girls. She had this very muscular build that she didn't like. But as we know, it is her strength that enables her to do things that other gymnasts won't even attempt. Turn your attention to the screens and watch as you learn a little bit more of her story.
Simone is the most decorated American gymnast and a 4-time all-around gymnastics champion. A testament to her love of the sport that began when she was a child.
I guess I love the freedom of the sport. There was no right or wrongs that you could do. You didn't have to have one particular body type. You made everything mold into what you were born with. So I think God gives every individual something special, and mine was talent. So to never take it for granted, which my dad always told me, don't waste God's gift that he gave you, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and one day I'll be too old to do gymnastics. So for now, I have to use it to the best of my ability.
Her journey to the top has not been easy and began with a turbulent home life.
My biological mom was suffering with drugs and alcohol, I do believe, and so we were taken into foster care. And we were in foster care for a little bit until my grandparents decided to take us in. So then that's kind of when our life reformed and everything.
Her grandmother Nellie, whom Simone now calls Mom, says God opened her heart to adopt Simone and her sister Adria.
It was meant to be, without a shadow of a doubt, nothing was supposed to be different. And it's the best decision we've ever made.
Since then, Nellie has encouraged Simone to put her life and career in God's hands.
I am a very prayerful person, and I encourage my children to do the same thing, to pray. And I know it doesn't matter what situation you're ever in. You just put it in the hands of the Lord, and He's gonna walk you through it.
Friends, if you want to find your heart for God, start by knowing who you are. Dig deep inside and see who God has created you uniquely to be. What passions and interests and skills, talents, resources, spiritual gifts has God given you? And then use those as you face the giants in your personal life. And as you seek to be a part of what God's doing in the world, and use your unique gifts to meet the needs of a hurting world. And know that you don't go alone. God will go with you. And trust that God will work in you and through you. You can have courage to face giants because you know who you are and whose you are.